How to be emotionally detached. Introduction. I remember a night 12 years ago. I had just sent someone a long message. It wasn't dramatic or desperate, just honest. One of those texts where you say what you really feel because you think the connection is strong enough to handle it. I waited for her reply. I could see she'd read it. The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. A few minutes later, all I got back was, "Okay." No follow-up, just that. One word. I laughed at first. The kind of laugh you do when you're trying not to feel stupid. But I could already feel the anxiety spreading through my body. My chest got tight. I started rereading what I sent, sentence by sentence, trying to figure out where I went wrong. I kept checking the screen like maybe it would change. Maybe another message would come. It didn't. The rest of the night I couldn't focus on anything. I wasn't even angry. I just felt small, embarrassed for caring so much. She was probably asleep, already moved on with her night, and I was still sitting in bed, stuck in a conversation that had already ended. And the worst part? This wasn't new for me. It had happened before, not just with her. With friends, coworkers, strangers online. I always gave too much weight to how people responded, or didn't. I couldn't separate my worth from their attention. That was the night I started asking myself a different question. Not, why did she respond that way? But why did I fall apart so easily? This book is about that. About what it means to build something steadier inside yourself. Something that doesn't shake every time the world doesn't clap for you. Why people get stuck here. Most people don't fall apart because of one message. They fall apart because of what the message taps into. Because from an early age, many of us were taught to equate caring with suffering. We were praised for being sensitive, selfless, emotionally available, but never taught when to step back. Never told how to protect our center. So we learn to scan every room for tension. To rehearse what we say before we say it. To monitor people's tone, their pause, their typing bubble, looking for signs we're still safe. We internalized moods that weren't ours. We built our self-worth around how quickly someone responded, how warmly they replied, how consistently they showed up. And now our nervous system is exhausted. Not because we're weak, but because we're overexposed, emotionally, mentally, and relationally. Backed by science. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that prolonged emotional reactivity, especially in social contexts, leads to elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, and increased anxiety symptoms. Studies in clinical psychology review confirm that people who struggle to separate self-worth from social validation are at significantly higher risk for chronic stress disorders. And neuroscience shows that the brain's default mode network, the system activated when the mind wanders, often replays unresolved social stress by default. Meaning, when you're doing nothing, your brain replays everything it thinks it did wrong. Detachment isn't just a personality trait. It's a corrective response to overstimulation, and it can be learned. What this book will teach. This book isn't about becoming distant. It's about becoming durable. It will show you how to stay soft without collapsing, build emotional walls without going numb, care deeply without chasing approval. Respond calmly instead of reacting reflexively. You'll learn how to protect your nervous system, decode your triggers, and let go of the people, patterns, and inner stories that keep dragging you into emotional overinvestment. Because emotional detachment is not about giving up on connection. It's about reclaiming your anchor so that connection doesn't cost you your center. Chapter 2. Detachment is not coldness. A few years ago, someone told me I had changed. They didn't mean it as a compliment. They said I'd become distant, quiet, less available, less reactive. You used to care more, they said. You used to be warmer. At first I took it personally. I spiraled. I wondered if I had become hardened, maybe even selfish. But when I looked closer, I realized something else was happening. I wasn't colder. I was just clearer. The false image of detachment. We've been trained to see emotional detachment as something negative. The detached person, in our mind, is cold. She's that boss who doesn't flinch when you're overwhelmed. That friend who seems unbothered by your silence. That partner who walks away too easily. But that's not detachment. That's disconnection. That's avoidance. That's neglect. True detachment doesn't mean you feel less. It means you no longer perform your feelings for approval. It means you can love without losing yourself. It means you can say no without guilt. It means you stop reacting and start choosing. Marcus Aurelius in the Burning City. There's a story, not just myth but recorded history, about the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. One night, while he was away from Rome on campaign, a fire broke out in the city. His advisors rushed to inform him. They expected panic, emotion, some kind of royal breakdown. Instead, he looked out calmly and said, "What matters now is how we respond." He didn't collapse. He didn't ignore it. He didn't shout orders just to feel in control. He simply accepted what was happening and turned inward to decide what could be done. This was the core of Stoic philosophy. You cannot control the fire. You can only control who you are when it burns. That is what emotional detachment is. Not apathy. Not silence. Presence with clarity. What emotional detachment actually is. Emotional detachment is the ability to step back before you step in. It's the quiet second you take before replying to the person who just hurt your feelings. It's the decision to pause, not because you don't care, but because you don't want to let your pain speak for you. It's the moment you recognize, I'm not abandoning this relationship. I'm just refusing to abandon myself in it. What the research shows. Studies in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, show that people who develop healthy emotional distancing techniques, such as observing their thoughts instead of merging with them, report lower levels of anxiety, impulsivity, and emotional burnout. In neuroscience, this is called affect labeling, the ability to name an emotion without becoming it. Your amygdala calms down when you say, I feel angry, instead of I am angry. Or, I'm noticing anxiety, instead of something must be wrong. That's detachment. The space between the stimulus and the spiral. The family argument. A few years back, I was in the middle of a tense family conversation. Someone said something sharp, something that would have normally made me fire back, just to defend myself. But this time I didn't. I paused. I breathed. I looked at the person, and I saw not their words, but their fear beneath the words. I calmly said, I understand why you're upset, but I won't continue if we're talking this way. It ended the argument without war. And later, someone else in the room said, I thought you were just going to let them walk over you. But you didn't. You were just calm. That moment changed something in me. Because for once, I didn't betray my peace just to prove a point. Calm is a form of generosity. People confuse detachment with being emotionally unavailable. But true detachment actually makes you more available, just not in a way that burns you out. When you are no longer governed by the need to fix, explain, prove, or impress, you become more present. You listen more because you're not waiting to react. You speak more clearly because you're not rushing to be liked. You hold space better because you aren't filling it with your own anxiety. That kind of presence is rare, and people feel it, even if they don't know what to call it. But what if they think you don't care? You will lose people. That's the part no one says up front. You'll lose the ones who needed your emotional chaos to feel alive. The ones who only connected with you through shared pain. The ones who felt seen only when you were sacrificing something. You'll stop rushing to explain yourself. You'll stop answering every late-night text. You'll stop over-apologizing for simply protecting your peace. And some people will call that cold. But listen closely. The people who truly know you will recognize it as healing. Detachment is an invitation to depth. Here's the truth most people miss. When you stop reacting emotionally to every trigger, you make space for something deeper, discernment. You begin to respond, not react. You choose what deserves your energy. You start listening for intention, not just tone. You give people the grace of your patience, not the weight of your judgment. And most of all, you begin to trust silence. You no longer fill every gap with noise, just to feel in control. You sit with things, you watch them settle, and only then do you move. That's not coldness. That's mastery. In the next chapter, we'll go beneath the surface, into the biology of why your emotions sometimes flood before you even realize what you're feeling. Because emotional detachment isn't just about discipline, and it's also about nervous system regulation. And once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself for every spiral. You start seeing it not as weakness, but as wiring. And wiring can be changed. Perfect direction. Below is Chapter 3. The nervous system and overreactions, expanded, structured, and grounded in science first. No metaphors. It starts by clearly explaining the focus, then walks the listener through psychology and physiology step by step. One personal story will appear later, not at the beginning. Chapter 3. The nervous system and overreactions. This chapter is about something many people misunderstand. Emotional detachment isn't just a mindset. It's not just discipline or wisdom or self-control. Those things matter, but they come later. Before all that, emotional detachment is a nervous system function. When you struggle to stay calm during stress, when you overreact to small things, when your heart races after a message or your voice shakes in confrontation, it's not just psychological. It's biological. And until you understand that, you'll keep blaming yourself for spiraling. You'll think you're just too sensitive, too emotional, not strong enough. But really, your body is doing exactly what it was wired to do. The nervous system. Fight, flight, freeze. Your nervous system has two primary modes. 1. Sympathetic. This is your stress response. It activates during danger. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, pupils dilate. You either fight, flee, or freeze. 2. Parasympathetic. This is your calm response. It helps you digest, sleep, and think clearly. It brings you back to balance after stress. When you're emotionally flooded, you're in a sympathetic state. Even if there's no real danger. It could be a text, a raised eyebrow, a shift in tone. But your body doesn't always know the difference between a threat and a trigger. It reacts before you think. And once you're activated, detachment becomes harder. How overreaction happens, step by step. Let's break it down. 1. A perceived threat appears. This can be emotional, criticism, silence, rejection, judgment. 2. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, lights up. It sends distress signals before your logical brain, the prefrontal cortex, has time to interpret the situation rationally. 3. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline are released. Your heart rate increases, your breathing changes, muscles prepare to act. 4. You react, not from clarity but from survival. You might snap, shut down, cry, or obsess. Even after the moment passes, the chemicals stay in your bloodstream for hours. This cycle trains your body to stay in hypervigilance, and when repeated often, it becomes a default state. What the science shows. Research published in the Journal of Neuroscience shows that emotional reactivity is strongly tied to amygdala overactivation and reduced connectivity with the prefrontal cortex, meaning your brain literally gets hijacked during emotional overload. In studies on trauma survivors, even mild stressors triggered exaggerated responses, not because they were weak, but because their nervous systems had been rewired by repeated exposure to stress. Another study in psychosomatic medicine found that people who practiced emotional distancing techniques had significantly lower levels of cortisol, especially in social conflict scenarios. Bottom line, you can't detach if your body thinks you're in danger. First, you must teach it that you're safe. Grounding tools that actually work. So how do you regulate the nervous system in real time? Here are 4 techniques backed by evidence, not hype. First, box breathing, 4-4-4-4. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, proven to reduce cortisol and activate the parasympathetic system. 2. Cold water stimulation. Splashing cold water on the face or placing something cold on the back of the neck activates the vagus nerve, which helps shift your body into calm mode. 3. Ground contact. Stand barefoot or place your hands firmly on a surface. This tactile feedback signals safety to the body. In studies, physical grounding reduced anxiety symptoms even in PTSD patients. 4. Anchored eye gaze. Keep your eyes on one unmoving point. It can help reduce dissociation or overwhelm. Maintaining still gaze, rather than darting eyes, tells your system that you're not under attack. These tools don't solve the emotional issue, but they create enough space for your thinking brain to come back online. And that space is where detachment becomes possible. The panic that made no sense. A few years ago, I was on a video call with someone I respected. They gave me a small piece of feedback, not harsh, not unkind, just direct. I nodded. I smiled. I said thank you. But the moment the call ended, I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking. I had a lump in my throat. I wanted to cry and disappear at the same time. I remember walking to the bathroom mirror, gripping the counter, trying to convince myself I wasn't in trouble, that nothing bad had happened. But my body wasn't listening. That was the moment I realized. This isn't about logic. My brain knew I wasn't under attack, but my nervous system didn't. So I stopped trying to talk myself out of it. I didn't use affirmations. I didn't scroll for reassurance. I sat. I placed a cold towel on my neck. I breathed like it was the only thing left to do. And slowly, my body came back. Then my clarity returned. That's when I understood what detachment really requires. Not clever thoughts, not maturity, but the skill to bring your body home to safety so your mind can follow. Final takeaway. Emotional overreaction is not a flaw. It's not a weakness. It's a nervous system that's been trained to stay alert for too long, in too many environments that ask too much of you. Detachment begins by understanding this. You cannot think your way out of panic. You have to regulate your way out. With practice, with slowness, with compassion. In the next chapter, we'll talk about one of the biggest blocks to detachment, taking things personally, and how to stop interpreting everything as an attack on who you are. Because once your nervous system calms, you begin to see that not everything needs your energy. Not everything deserves your story. Chapter 4. Stop taking it personally. This chapter is about one of the most common habits that destroy peace of mind, taking things personally, interpreting other people's words, tone, silence, or behavior as a reflection of your worth, your failure, or your mistake. It happens quietly, almost automatically. Someone gives you a short response. You think, did I say too much? They don't invite you. You wonder, did I do something wrong? They look annoyed. You assume, they must be upset with me. You fill in the gaps with self-blame. You overanalyze. And eventually you carry tension that was never yours to carry. But here's the truth. Most of the time it's not about you. It's about them. Their stress, their past, their internal dialogue, their assumptions, their mood. Yet your mind keeps rewriting the moment as if you're the center of their actions. And when you do that repeatedly, you stay trapped in an emotional loop where everything feels like proof that you're not enough. Why the brain personalizes everything. Personalization is a cognitive distortion. In psychology, it means taking external events and interpreting them as being directly related to yourself, especially when there's little or no evidence to support it. You don't just notice what someone does. You assume it has something to do with you. You make yourself the cause. You make your character the problem. This usually starts in environments where unpredictability was common. If you grew up with inconsistent caregivers, people whose moods were sharp, shifting, or silent, your brain may have developed a hyper-awareness of others' behavior. You learn to scan the room, monitor reactions, and adjust your tone to keep the peace. In that context, personalization was a form of survival. You assumed everything was about you because sometimes it was. When a parent got angry, you blamed yourself. When someone withdrew, you assumed you caused it. It was safer to make it your fault, because then at least you believed you could fix it. But now, as an adult, you still carry that lens. You still believe that if someone is distant, upset, or distracted, it must be a response to you. And that belief wears down your sense of self, one interaction at a time. Empirical insight. What people actually focus on. There's a psychological principle called the spotlight effect. It describes the tendency for people to vastly overestimate how much others are noticing or judging them. In a well-known study at Cornell University, researchers asked participants to wear an embarrassing t-shirt in public and then estimate how many people noticed it. They guessed that over 50% of the people in the room saw it. In reality, less than 25% did. This shows something important. People are not thinking about you as much as you think they are. Most are preoccupied with themselves, their own self-consciousness, their own insecurities, their own priorities. When someone speaks sharply, forgets to respond, or changes their behavior, the most likely cause is something internal to them, not something you triggered. But because of the brain's pattern-seeking habit, you fill in the blank with your own fear. That fear becomes a story, and that story becomes your stress. A real story, the class presentation. A young woman named Amina, now a medical resident, once shared a story during a seminar about perception and reaction. Back in her first year of university, she gave a short presentation in class. She had prepared it the night before and wasn't particularly confident about it. After she finished, she walked back to her seat and caught the professor looking down and scribbling something into a notebook. He didn't say anything. He didn't smile. No reaction at all. For the rest of the day, she couldn't think straight. She convinced herself she had disappointed him, that her talk was unoriginal, that he was probably writing a note about how poorly she delivered it. She avoided speaking in the next class. She even began to question whether she was in the right program. Later that semester, she met with that same professor during office hours to ask about something unrelated. Before she left, he looked at her and said, "By the way, the day you presented, I really appreciated your point about diagnostic bias. I actually wrote it down because I wanted to follow up on it later." It wasn't judgment. It was interest. But her brain had turned the silence into failure. This is what personalization does. It doesn't wait for truth. It assumes meaning, and usually the most painful kind. What you can do instead. Here are 5 practical tools to begin reversing the habit of taking things personally. 1. Pause before interpretation. When something happens, someone's silence, a strange tone, a canceled plan, pause. Ask, what else could this mean that isn't about me? Write down 3 other possible explanations. 2. Use third-person reflection. Instead of saying, "Yeah, they don't like me," say, "I'm noticing I feel rejected." This simple shift creates space between the feeling and the conclusion. 3. Track patterns, not one-offs. Don't judge your worth based on one strange message, one off moment, one missed reply. Emotional detachment means tracking how people show up over time, not reacting to every micro-movement. 4. Don't fill in the silence. If they haven't said anything, don't decide what they meant. Detachment sometimes means tolerating the discomfort of not knowing. 5. Anchor back to who you are. When something stings, ask yourself, do I trust who I was in that moment? If you were kind, honest, and respectful, let that be enough. Let it stand. You don't need to rewrite yourself based on someone else's lack of clarity. Final thought. Most of the emotional pain we carry wasn't caused by other people. It was caused by the stories we told ourselves about what they did. We assumed meaning where there was none. We chased answers to questions no one was asking. We tried to manage other people's perception because we were afraid to sit with our own uncertainty. But the truth is this. When you stop taking things personally, you get your life back. You begin to respond to what's real, not what your fear imagined. You stop spinning your mind around what someone might have meant and return to what you actually know. That's detachment, not indifference, but clarity. In the next chapter, we'll explore where emotional investment feels most dangerous. In relationships, romantic, familial, or otherwise. The closer someone is to your heart, the easier it is to lose yourself in their actions. We'll talk about how to care deeply without collapsing, and why some forms of love only survive when you stop trying to manage the outcome. Chapter 5. Detachment in Relationships. Story. The silence after the "I miss you." There was a woman named Samira. She was in her early 30s and had been dating a man for several months. Things were slow but warm. Regular texts, long phone calls, occasional weekends together. Nothing explosive, but consistent enough that she let her guard down. One night, she sent him a message. "I miss you. I've been thinking about you a lot this week." It wasn't a big confession. She didn't expect fireworks. Just something light. A moment of vulnerability. He didn't reply. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even after she followed up with a casual, "Hope your week's going okay." A week passed. Then two. Eventually he responded, vaguely. No explanation, no apology. Just a short update about work and something he saw on Netflix. She didn't push. She didn't accuse. But she felt something break inside. What followed wasn't heartbreak. It was something more confusing. She blamed herself for reaching out. She told her friends she'd been too much. She spiraled privately, trying to figure out where she'd miscalculated. That was the moment she realized she hadn't just developed feelings. She had invested her emotional identity into how someone else showed up. And now that they had withdrawn, she didn't just feel rejected. She felt erased. Why this chapter matters. Of all the spaces where detachment becomes difficult, relationships are the most charged. Romantic partners, close friends, family members. They mirror back how we see ourselves. So when they withdraw, criticize, betray, or ghost, it doesn't just feel like loss. It feels like a collapse in self-worth. We confuse presence with value. We assume that someone's attention means we are lovable, and their absence means we aren't. This chapter is not about withdrawing from people to protect yourself. It's about staying whole, even when someone else leaves. It's about separating your emotional stability from someone else's ability to show up. What makes relationships so triggering? Relationships activate some of the deepest emotional patterns in the brain. Attachment needs, wired into us from infancy. Mirror neurons. We literally feel what others feel, especially those close to us. Rejection sensitivity. A cognitive bias that makes us interpret absence as abandonment. Core wound activation. Moments that trigger older, unresolved pain. When someone you love pulls away, your body doesn't respond with logic. It responds with panic. Your nervous system registers it as a threat, even if it's just a missed text or a cold tone. That's why even small shifts in connection feel so big. And this is where detachment becomes essential. Not to avoid love, but to avoid building your identity around someone else's behavior. Attachment theory, why we get pulled in so deep. In attachment theory, people tend to fall into three major categories. 1. Secure attachment. Trusts closeness but doesn't fear loss. Responds to distance without spiraling. 2. Anxious attachment. Seeks constant reassurance. Sensitive to withdrawal. Often overthinks silence or ambiguity. 3. Avoidant attachment. Avoids emotional intimacy. Feels overwhelmed by closeness. Often withdraws to self-regulate. Many anxious types are drawn to avoidant types, and this combination fuels emotional dependency. The more one person pulls away, the more the other overinvests. The relationship becomes an emotional seesaw, and neither person ever really feels safe. Detachment in this context isn't about losing interest. It's about refusing to chase someone's attention just to feel grounded in yourself. How to practice detachment in real time. 1. Pause before you reach out. Ask yourself, am I reaching out because I genuinely want to connect, or because I'm trying to ease my anxiety? Intent matters. 2. Don't chase closure. Many people withhold communication as a way of avoiding discomfort. That's on them. You don't need a full explanation to move on. 3. Observe their pattern, not just their apology. If someone repeatedly disappears, comes back, and says the right thing, watch the pattern. Words are cheap. Detachment helps you stay focused on behavior over promises. 4. Allow silence to be a message. If someone stops showing up, accept that. Don't invent stories or excuses. Detachment means letting silence speak, without begging it to explain itself. 5. Recenter on reality. If your thoughts are spiraling, write down what you actually know. Not what you fear, not what you assume, but what's been shown. When love feels like loss of self. One of the signs you need emotional detachment is when love becomes performance. When you always agree to avoid conflict. When you suppress your needs because you're afraid they'll leave. When you feel like your mood depends on their mood. When the absence of a reply ruins your entire day. These are not signs of love. They're signs that your identity has become entangled with someone else's emotional availability. Real love doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't ask you to disappear in order to be kept. Offering your hand, not your spine. Imagine standing in front of someone and reaching out your hand. You're offering connection, presence, availability. But the moment they hesitate or pull back, you drop to your knees and stretch further. Offering not just your hand, but your whole body, your spine, your balance. This is what emotional overinvestment looks like. Detachment means keeping your balance, even while you reach. It means letting others come toward you of their own will, not pulling them by sacrificing your own posture. Final reflection. People will come and go. Some will leave without warning. Some will withdraw just when you start to trust them. Some will say the right things and still fail to show up when it matters. You cannot stop that. What you can stop is abandoning yourself in response. Emotional detachment in relationships doesn't mean you love less. It means you stop measuring your worth based on how someone else shows up. It means you stop auditioning for love and start witnessing the truth of what people give and what they don't. In the next chapter, we'll shift from personal relationships to professional spaces and look at how emotional entanglement can quietly sabotage your peace in the workplace, social settings, and group dynamics. Chapter 6. Detachment at Work and in Public. Story: The Mood That Set the Room. Victor was a sharp, capable employee, organized, responsive, and reliable. He worked at a mid-sized creative agency and was well-liked by most of the team. But there was one problem: his manager. Every morning, Victor would walk into the office unsure of what kind of mood his boss would be in. Some days, she was warm and engaging. Other days, she barely made eye contact. Victor began tracking her behavior like weather patterns. If she sighed too heavily or skipped pleasantries, he would spiral. He would reread his last email. He'd ask himself if he was falling behind. He'd mentally rehearse conversations from days ago, trying to find what he did wrong. By noon, if she still hadn't said anything reassuring, Victor would be drained. His productivity dropped. His self-esteem wavered. He couldn't tell where her mood ended and his anxiety began. What Victor didn't realize was that he wasn't just doing his job. He was emotionally outsourcing his self-worth to his manager's facial expressions. Why workplaces trigger emotional enmeshment. Work isn't just about performance. It's also about perception. About being seen, approved of, validated. For many people, work is where they receive, or lose, a large portion of their identity. This becomes even more complicated in environments where feedback is inconsistent, hierarchies are rigid, praise is scarce, communication is unclear. In those spaces, many people stop doing the job and start doing emotional labor instead. They manage other people's feelings. They avoid difficult conversations. They monitor tone, read between lines, and apologize preemptively. They become experts in keeping everyone else comfortable, even if it costs their own mental clarity. This is the exact opposite of detachment. This is emotional absorption, and it leads to burnout, resentment, and chronic second-guessing. What emotional detachment looks like at work. Emotional detachment in public or professional spaces does not mean shutting down or becoming robotic. It means maintaining boundaries around interpretation, responsibility, and reaction. It means not personalizing someone else's silence, not chasing unspoken approval, not reinterpreting every shift in tone as your failure, not building your confidence on compliments you haven't received. Detachment protects your internal state so you can stay focused on outcomes, not on managing moods. Science, emotional contagion in shared spaces. A 1994 study published in Journal of Personality and Social Psychology coined the term emotional contagion, the idea that people in groups unconsciously mimic and absorb each other's emotions. Later research at the University of New South Wales showed that a single person's visible stress in an office can raise cortisol levels in nearby co-workers, even if no words are exchanged. What does this mean? If you're not emotionally detached, you can spend an entire day absorbing someone else's frustration, insecurity, or pressure, and walk away feeling like it was yours. Detachment doesn't mean isolation. It means recognizing what you're absorbing and choosing what to let in. Common public scenarios that require detachment. 1. Your boss is in a bad mood. Detachment means you focus on your deliverables, not her emotions. 2. A coworker responds with unnecessary attitude. Detachment means you stay factual. You don't chase explanations or mirror their energy. 3. A group excludes you from a conversation or project. Detachment means you note the pattern. You don't internalize the exclusion as proof of inferiority. 4. You're criticized publicly, even unfairly. Detachment means you receive the data, not the drama. You evaluate the information without letting shame cloud your response. 5. You're praised and suddenly feel pressure to perform even more. Detachment means you accept the compliment without building your identity around it. Your inner desk. Imagine that your emotional world is like a desk, an actual desk. Not everyone is allowed behind it. You can take input. You can listen. But the space behind the desk is sacred. It's where you make sense of your day. It's where your values sit. It's where you decide how much energy to give. Detachment means you don't allow just anyone to come behind that desk and rearrange your files. How to practice detachment in public spaces. 1. Label behavior instead of internalizing it. Instead of "they're mad at me," say, "they responded abruptly." This is observational, not emotional. It protects clarity. 2. Return to your purpose. Ask yourself, what am I here to do? This keeps you anchored to your role, not your social positioning. 3. Separate tasks from tone. Not everyone will deliver things with kindness. Detachment lets you extract the message without reacting to the packaging. 4. Use the 24-hour rule. When tempted to over-respond to an email, message, or tone, give it time. Let your body return to baseline before deciding how much it deserves your energy. 5. Protect your emotional schedule. Now, if you wouldn't let someone interrupt your lunch or calendar, why let them interrupt your peace? Treat your mental clarity as a time block, protected, non-negotiable. Final reflection. Detachment in public spaces is not about being emotionally numb. It's about being emotionally sovereign. You're still kind. You're still receptive. You still listen. But you stop absorbing tension as your responsibility. You stop reading every micro-expression as a mirror. You stop outsourcing your confidence to the reactions of other people. Your peace stops being contingent on how the room feels. And for the first time, you get to stay steady, even when the environment shifts. In the next chapter, we'll shift from settings to systems, daily practices that train you to live in emotional detachment, not just understand it. You'll learn how to build rituals, responses, and self-checks that reinforce clarity in the smallest moments. Chapter 7. Training Emotional Detachment Daily. Emotional detachment isn't something you turn on during conflict or crisis. It's not a one-time reaction or a clever comeback. It's a trained skill, built slowly, through repeated decisions made in quiet, low-stakes moments. Most people think they'll develop emotional detachment when they're tested, when someone ghosts, when the conversation gets heated, when anxiety hits. But by then, it's already too late. You can't build a parachute while falling. This chapter is about the daily habits that strengthen emotional detachment over time, so that when pressure comes, your system already knows how to stay grounded. Why detachment must be trained, not just understood. Emotionally reactive people often already understand what detachment is. They can explain boundaries, mindfulness, and logic. But when their nervous system is triggered, they forget everything. They spiral. They replay. They panic. That's because intellectual understanding isn't enough. You need practice, so that detachment becomes your default, not your theory. You train your emotional system the same way you train your body or attention span. Through repetition, through consistency, through low-resistance exposure. That means building routines and micro-decisions that separate your identity from your environment, not only when it hurts, but when it's quiet. What this looks like in practice. Here are 5 foundational habits for training daily detachment. First, morning emotional check-in. Each morning before your phone, your email, your to-do list, ask one simple question. What do I not need to carry today? It can be someone else's bad mood. It can be a fear that hasn't happened. It can be an imaginary argument you're still rehearsing. This practice doesn't solve everything, but it gives your brain a filter, a signal to start the day with choice, not absorption. Dusra, response delay, 5 to 10 minutes. One of the most powerful detachment tools is simply waiting. If you receive a text that triggers you, wait. If you see something passive-aggressive online, wait. If someone says something sharp, wait. The space between event and reaction is where detachment lives. Psychologically, this trains your brain to shift from emotional brain, amygdala, to rational brain, prefrontal cortex. It builds the habit of not reacting from the first impulse. Mundram, eye gaze regulation. In psychology, there's evidence that anchored visual focus, staring calmly at a fixed point, can reduce nervous system arousal. If you're in a tense conversation, try this. Look at the person's eyes. Then shift your focus briefly to the space between their eyes, or a still point near them, e.g., collarbone or desk edge. This grounds your attention and reduces sympathetic nervous system engagement. This is not avoidance. It's regulation. You're staying present without locking into emotional hyper-alertness. Non-gavadi. Emotional fasting. Most people don't realize how much emotional noise they consume every day. Through podcasts, timelines, text threads, and digital performances, choose a window each day to not consume anything emotional. No scrolling, no commentary, no opinions, no updates. Use that time for stillness, cooking, walking, or manual tasks. This is how you restore signal clarity. So when real emotional decisions arise, you're not already full of other people's energy. Thought Labeling Journal. Each night, write down one moment from your day where you caught yourself spiraling. Then label the exact thought pattern. Was it personalization, catastrophizing, approval seeking, comparison? Then ask, what's the clearest thing I could have done in that moment if I were fully detached? Over time, this exercise rewires not just how you react, but how you interpret reality. Story: The Nurse Who Stopped Apologizing. Isaiah is a registered nurse who works in a fast-paced hospital in New Jersey. He used to apologize constantly, to patients, to doctors, to families, even for things that weren't his fault. If a surgeon snapped at him for being 2 minutes late with a chart, he'd say sorry 5 times before walking away. One day, his supervisor pulled him aside and said, "You don't need to absorb everyone else's adrenaline. You're not a punching bag for stress." That line stuck with him. So Isaiah started practicing one new habit. When someone reacted emotionally, he paused. He didn't rush to explain himself. He didn't shrink. He just listened, and then responded with facts, not feelings. Over the next few months, he noticed a shift. His team respected him more. His confidence stabilized. And most importantly, he started ending shifts without carrying other people's behavior home. That wasn't personality. That was training. Final takeaway: emotional detachment isn't a personality trait. It's not something you just get one day. It's built through repetition, structure, and choice. Most people try to detach in crisis, but the ones who succeed are the ones who practiced when no one was watching. They let silence breathe, reframed their first thought, stopped assuming urgency, created calm before the storm arrived. When detachment becomes daily, peace becomes sustainable. In the next chapter, we'll talk about the subtle trap of identity attachment, how even your strengths, roles, and virtues can keep you stuck if you don't learn to step back and separate who you are from how you are seen. Chapter 8: Detachment and Identity. Opening story: The Nice One Who Broke Down. Rachel was the dependable friend, always available, always polite, always making sure everyone felt heard. Her group of friends even joked about it. If Rachel doesn't show up, it's not a real hangout. What no one saw was that Rachel hadn't disagreed with anyone in 2 years. She said yes to things she didn't want. She offered rides when she was exhausted. She answered late-night calls she didn't have the energy for. Then one day, someone called her selfish because she said she couldn't help with a last-minute favor. That moment shattered her. Not because of the request, but because of what it triggered. If she wasn't the helpful one, who was she? That's what happens when your identity becomes fused with a role you never gave yourself permission to outgrow. Why identity attachment is so dangerous. We don't just attach to people. We attach to roles and the emotional expectations that come with them. I'm the calm one. I'm the overachiever. I'm the healer. I'm the one who always shows up. I'm the independent one. I'm the one who never needs help. These identities start out as strengths or survival strategies. But over time, they become traps. Because if you ever behave outside that identity, even for a moment, you feel like you've failed. And the more tightly you cling to these roles, the harder it becomes to tell what you actually want, apart from what you've been conditioned to be. Psychological insight, role enmeshment, and self-erosion. In clinical psychology, this is often referred to as role enmeshment, the blending of identity and function. When people grow up in households where their value came from being useful, invisible, or perfect, they carry those roles into adulthood. Their self-worth becomes conditional. If I'm not productive, I'm lazy. If I don't help, I'm cold. If I say no, I'm ungrateful. If I express need, I'm a burden. Over time, this leads to self-erasure. You perform, adapt, apologize, not because it's who you are, but because it's who people expect you to be. Detachment here doesn't mean rebellion. It means the quiet courage to observe yourself without clinging to a role, the costume you forgot you were wearing. Think of identity like a costume. At first, you put it on because it fits the part you're playing. The student, the strong one, the leader, the survivor. But years pass, and you forget it's a costume. You think it's your skin. So when someone challenges it, or when you want to take it off, you hesitate. Because if you let go of it, what's left? Detachment is the moment you realize you're allowed to change costumes. You're allowed to grow out of your roles. You're allowed to return to what's underneath. Signs you're attached to an identity that's draining you. 1. You feel guilt when resting or doing less. 2. You get angry when people don't notice how much you give. 3. You struggle to ask for help, even when overwhelmed. 4. You feel lost when people don't need you. 5. You fear being misunderstood more than being unhappy. If these are familiar, it means your identity has become a cage, and detachment is the key. How to practice identity detachment. 1. Name the role you're overperforming. Write down the version of you that's most exhausting right now. Then ask, where did I learn that this role made me valuable? 2. Track. Guilt, not just burnout. Burnout shows up when you're exhausted. Guilt shows up when you stop performing. Track the moments you feel guilty. They'll point to the identities that no longer serve you. 3. Separate "this is me" from "this is habit." Every time you respond a certain way, ask, do I want this? Or do I just know how to do this well? Mastery alignment. 4. Tolerate the discomfort of letting go. Some people will reject the new version of you. Some will say you've changed, and they'll be right. Detachment means letting that discomfort happen without rushing back to who you were. Final reflection. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you're not fixing, proving, managing, or softening yourself? Emotional detachment isn't just about resisting other people's control. It's about gently stepping away from your own outdated self-image. The roles you were praised for, needed for, or confined by. Because freedom doesn't just mean walking away from toxic people. Sometimes it means walking away from the version of yourself that learned how to survive, but never got to rest. In the final chapter before the conclusion, we'll talk about what happens when detachment starts working, and how the peace you've wanted for so long might feel unfamiliar, even lonely at first. Chapter 9. When detachment feels lonely. Detachment is often framed as a breakthrough, and it is. You stop reacting. You stop chasing closure. You stop collapsing in other people's storms. And for the first time in a long time, you feel calm. But something else happens too. Something you probably weren't warned about. It feels quiet. Almost too quiet. There's space now. Where panic used to live, where drama used to occupy your mind, where texting, checking, fixing, worrying used to give you something to do. And for many people, that space doesn't feel peaceful at first. It feels lonely. Why peace can feel like emptiness at first. Your nervous system is conditioned by repetition, not truth. If you've spent years in emotional hypervigilance, measuring tone, over-explaining, absorbing moods, your baseline became noise, tension, and over-involvement. Even if it was painful, it was familiar. Now that you're no longer reacting, chasing, or entangling, your system registers the absence of stimulation as a threat. This is called nervous system dysregulation in rest. The feeling of discomfort, anxiety, or numbness when things finally calm down. Your body doesn't yet know that peace is safe. The biology of calm withdrawal. In psychology, this process is sometimes referred to as emotional withdrawal symptoms, similar to what happens after leaving an addictive dynamic. In emotionally intense relationships, whether with people, environments, or identity roles, the nervous system becomes dependent on the highs and lows. The unpredictability becomes your baseline. So when you start practicing emotional detachment, the stimulation drops. The reward cycles break. The silence expands. And for a time, your system may interpret that as loss. Not because detachment is wrong, but because intensity is what you are used to. The unexpected emotions that show up. 1. Guilt, for not being as available, as responsive, as present as you were before. 2. Shame, for choosing yourself, for not chasing, for changing the script. 3. Grief, for relationships that fade when you stop holding them together. 4. Emptiness, because your mind doesn't know what to fill the space with yet. These are normal. They are not signs that you're doing something wrong. They are signs that your system is readjusting to emotional neutrality. Story: The friend who didn't reach out. Sophie had always been the one to keep her friend group together. She planned birthdays, followed up when someone was distant, created the group chats, and remembered everyone's milestones. After years of feeling drained and unacknowledged, she decided to step back. Not dramatically, just quietly. She stopped initiating. She gave space. She allowed others the opportunity to show up. No one did. Weeks passed. The texts stopped. Her phone stayed quiet. And though she had expected some drop-off, the silence hit harder than she thought. She told herself it was a good thing, that she was learning who really valued her. But it still felt like grief. Not just over the friendships, but over the version of herself who had always believed that if she just cared enough, people would always care back. That version was gone. And for a while, what replaced her was nothing. How to rebuild without reverting. Here's how to move through the loneliness without going back to old patterns. First, don't confuse stillness with abandonment. Quiet isn't always bad. It's just unfamiliar. Stay in it. Let your body learn that calm is safe, even when it's not crowded with urgency. Dusra, expect relational recalibration. Some relationships will fade. Others will feel different. That doesn't mean detachment makes you alone. It means it reveals where real connection never existed in the first place. Mundram. Fill the space slowly, not reactively. Don't rush to replace the noise. Fill it with things that don't demand your nervous system. Walks, quiet meals, slow routines, solitude that doesn't ask you to perform. Nangavadu. Celebrate without audience. Learn to feel proud even when no one claps. Learn to say I did well without sharing the screenshot. This is emotional sovereignty. Aindavadu. Remember why you detached in the first place. When the urge to reattach kicks in, revisit the reasons you walked away. From patterns, from people, from performances. Revisit the exhaustion you used to normalize. Final reflection. Loneliness is not proof that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's the first clear signal that you're no longer performing a version of yourself to stay connected. Detachment doesn't just clear people out. It clears noise, habits, and false comforts. And in that clearing, things can feel vacant. But vacancy is not failure. It's a reset. And if you let yourself sit in that reset long enough, something else begins to take root. Not the need for attention, not the fear of being left behind, not the urgency to fill the space, but presence. Uncomplicated, quiet, durable. And in the conclusion, we'll talk about what happens next. Not just what detachment takes away, but what it gives back when you stay the course. Conclusion. You will lose people, but you will find yourself. Emotional detachment is not easy. It's not the absence of feeling, and it's not a quick way to gain control. It's a long, quiet shift, away from reflex and into intention. Along the way, you'll lose things. You'll lose the compulsion to explain yourself. You'll lose the addiction to closure. You'll lose the habit of chasing relationships that depend on your overfunctioning. You'll lose your attachment to being liked, to being right, to being seen a certain way. And yes, you'll lose people. Some will call you distant. Some will say you've changed. Some will fade because their connection to you depended on you always being available, agreeable, or anxious. But in all that losing, something begins to return. Your time, your clarity, your peace, your ability to hear yourself without needing someone else to agree. Story. The shift that didn't announce itself. A man named Ruben once shared something in a workshop that stayed with me. He said, I stopped texting people first. I stopped re-explaining myself in conversations. I stopped trying to seem chill just so people would like me. And at first, it felt like I'd ruined my social life. But then I realized nothing actually fell apart. I just stopped keeping things alive that were never breathing on their own. Detachment didn't make him cold. It made him honest. And that honesty, even if it came with silence, was the first time he felt grounded in years. You are not cold. You are clear. You didn't stop caring. You stopped begging to be understood. You stopped trading your peace for approval. You stopped letting every emotion demand a reaction. That's not numbness. That's emotional adulthood. And it's not something that gets rewarded with applause. It's something that changes your relationship to everything, quietly, steadily, permanently. What now? Let this book be the beginning of a new way of being. Not just something you read, but something you live into. Every time you choose silence over spiraling. Every time you pause instead of reacting. Every time you walk away from noise you used to chase. You are choosing clarity. And every time someone leaves because they can no longer manipulate your emotional availability, you are not losing love. You are losing the illusion that survival means sacrifice. The people who truly see you, value you, build with you. They don't need your over-explanation. They don't need your exhaustion. They don't need your emotional collapse. They just need your truth. And you need it too. So let them go. Let the habits go. Let the noise go. What you'll find in that space isn't emptiness. It's you.